the class that we want. Here, the segue identifier, we can check that here. And if you remember, I set it to be show photos by photographer, right? That's, everyone know what that is, right? That is this thing right here, this little segue. Okay, its identifier is this. That's got to match what we're doing in here. All right, so we're checking that. And again, if we're doing the did select row at index path case where it's just the detail view, then the segue identifier is going to be nil, so its length is going to be nil. And so I use length there just to check for empty string and nil equally, either of them, and I'm doing not. So if there's no segue identifier, then as long as we're going to a photos by photographer CDTVC, then we know what we're going to do. Now, some people would argue that checking this segue identifier, that you should almost never do that. Okay? Because if you're segueing to a photos by photographer CDTVC from a photographer CDTVC, you know what you're doing. You don't need a segue identifier to tell you what you're doing. That's what some people would say. And I see that argument. It's not a bad argument. I even buy that argument that really you only want to use segue identifiers if for some reason you had two different segues. And we'll talk a little bit later in this demo an example of where you might actually have that. So one could argue just delete that. Okay, just get rid of that entirely. Don't even check that. And here we know that this is it's photos by photographer CDTVC, photos by photographer CDTVC equals photos by photographer CDTVC star VC. All right, so we have that. So now we're going to prepare this view controller. Photos by photographer dot photographer equals the photographer that was selected in our row. Okay?
But can you also pass the context?
Yeah, we'll talk about that. So the question is, don't I have to pass the context to this new controller? And the answer is yes, and I'm doing that in this line of code right here. So let's go look at photos by photographer. Okay, so here's photo by photographer. It's going to get this photographer. What do we need to do in photos by photographer? Well, really the main thing we need to do is fetch the photos by that photographer. So let's go ahead and look at that. Every time I set the photographer, and you're noticing, by the way, anytime you have a public model setter, you're almost always going to use the setter to update your view when someone sets your model. That's kind of an obvious thing. One thing I might do here, by the way, is set my title to be the photographer's name. That would be a good thing, right? I'm a controller that's showing a bunch of photos by a photographer, so my title might want to be that. But the real thing I need to do here is set up my fetched results controller. That's the main thing that CDTVCs need to do, is set up their fetch results controller, and then they kind of just work automatically, right? So to save some time, I have that ready to go here. This is what it looks like. I'm going to go through every line of this, don't worry. So first is answering your question, how do I get my context? I need a context. I can't fetch without a context. And the answer is, I'm just going to ask the photographer what context it's in. Okay, someone gave me a photographer, and I'm going to go find out what the context is from it. That photographer came from some database. I want to get the photos in the same database. Okay? So I don't need to pass the context separately. It comes along with the photographer. If the context is nil, so either the photographer is nil or for some weird reason the photographer didn't come from a context, that's impossible, but mostly this would be the photographer is nil, then I'm going to set my fetch results controller to nil. That blanks out my table. If you set your fetch results controller to nil, then your table is going to be blank, which is what I want in this case if someone gives me a photographer with no context or gives me a nil photographer. But otherwise, I'm going to set up a fetch request for all the photos where my predicate is who took equals that photographer. Okay, everyone understand that line of code? Hopefully, if you started on your homework, then you understand it. And then I'm going to sort the photos by the photo's title. So they're going to be in alphabetical order by the title of the photo. So this is a property on photo, if you'll recall. And we're going to sort by that. Use this kind of finder-like sorting order. And then that's it. I just create this self.fetch results controller. It's got the request right here that I just created, and the context, which I got from the photographer. And I'm not doing any sections, and there's no caching. Any questions about that? Hopefully everyone understands that from last time. All right, now what else does this photos by photographer table need to do? Well, not much else. Okay, by setting the fetch results controller, it's getting the result, but it has to display those results. So it has to do sell for row at index path. Okay, that's the one thing that Core Data Table View Controller cannot do for you because it doesn't know what attributes of the object you want to show in the rows. So we got to do that. The other thing it needs to do is navigation. Because when I click on a photo, I want to have that image view controller show its image. Right? So it needs to do those two things. But I'm not going to put those in this class. Okay? Why am I not going to put these in the class? Because those two things, every Core Data Table View Controller that shows photos wants to do. Okay? Every single one of them. So I'm going to create a generic Photos Core Data Table View Controller that knows how to do that. All right? And then I'm going to have this class inherit from it. So I'm doing this to really emphasize, because a few of you are still struggling a little bit with this concept of using object-oriented design to build your controllers. Okay? So we're going to do it again right here. So I'm going to create a new controller. Okay? It's going to be a new Core Data View Controller. It's going to be called Photos Core Data Table View Controller. And its job in life is to show a bunch of photos. Okay? So let's do that. Let's find out what its public API is. Okay, here's its public API. This turns out to have no public API. Because all you need to do to make this thing work is hook up fetched results controller to any photo fetch request. Okay? This thing is a Core Data Table View Controller, so it has this fetched results controller thing. As long as you set that fetch results controller to any photo request, then the job of this class is going to be to display it and let you navigate from it as well. Okay? Generic. It'll work for any photos. You don't even have to set anything except for the fetch results controller. All right, so let's look at this guy's implementation. Pretty straightforward here. Doesn't need any of this. All right. So here we got to just implement those two things, self-row at index path and navigation. So let's look at self-row at index path. Looks like this, table view self-row at index path. And of course, we'll just get the cell. Okay, this code should be very, very familiar to you. Go to the table view, we dequeue. Okay, I'm going to call this photo cell. Now, it's interesting. This is a generic class, and it's using photo cell as its reuse thing. So I probably want to put that information into its public header file. So I'm probably here, I'm going to say use photo cell as your table view cells reuse ID. Okay? That way anyone who's using my class doesn't have to go look at its implementation. They can just get this information from the header file and do it. So let's make sure we do that. Let's go back here. Here's our photos by photographer cell. Let's see what its cells reuse identifier is. And the answer is, ooh, Flickr photo cell, because we stole this from Shutterbug. And Shutterbug is a Flickr thing, whereas we are a core database thing. So I'm going to get rid of that word Flickr and make sure that this is what it's supposed to be, photo cell. Okay? You understand that? So back to here. So now I've got this photo cell. Okay? What am I going to do with it? Well, I need to get the photo that I'm supposed to show in this cell. So that's photo star, and of course we need to import photo. Photo equals self.fetch results controller, object at index path, the index path. Okay, this argument right here. This hopefully is completely, you understand this. Now I just need to set the text label. I'm going to set its text to be the photo's title. And let's set the detail, this is the subtitle thing, to the photo's subtitle. And return the cell. Okay? So you can see that writing cell for row and index path is pretty easy when it's a core data table view cell, because usually the object in the row, which you can get with one line of code, has what you want. You just display it. Okay? Now let's talk about the navigation. I told you I had this generic table view navigation thing. I'm going to use it again right here. Okay? So it's the exact same thing that I put in the other one. I just have to make sure this is appropriate to what we're doing here. So this is photos again. So the managed objects are going to be photo star photo. Okay, so now I got the photo out of the row. What does this thing do in terms of navigation? Well, it will navigate to an image view controller and show the image. All right, so let's import image view controller, because that's what we're going to be navigating to. Okay, get down here. Kind of class image view controller. Again, I could probably skip the segue thing here, because if I'm navigating to an image view controller from this photos view controller, I almost certainly want to show my image. There's not really nothing else I might want to do. So we'll just do that. So image view controller IVC equals image view controller VC. And we just need to set the IVC's image URL equal to an NS URL with the photos image URL. The reason I have to do this, of course, is that you can't store an image URL in the database. We stored it as a string. So this converts it into a URL because image view controller takes a URL as its public API. I could also do something here, title equals the photos title. Okay, because really the image view controller, since it only has an image URL, it doesn't really have enough information to set its own title like the other one did, the photographer, this one, this guy's subclass that we created, it knew how to do it, but this one really can't, so we'll help it out, set its title. Okay, everyone understand that? So now we have this nice generic photos showing thing. Let's go ahead and make our photos by photographer inherit from it instead. Photos CDTVC, photos CDTVC. Okay, so now it just inherited the ability to do self-row and index and navigation. Okay, and it still does the fetch itself. So it's the one determining what photos show up. Its superclass is the one putting them in the rows. Everyone understand what I'm doing there? Okay. Okay, so that's awesome. So everybody kind of knows how to navigate. Everyone knows how to load themselves up. And might be that's all we need to do. Let me see if I remember anything else. I think that's it. So let's go see if we're working. Let's try this on the iPad because we just built, oops, let's do it on the real iPad. We just built this, so let's go ahead and do that. Let's see what if we have any bugs, things not working. Maybe we didn't set some of our segues right or something like that. So we can see what's going on here. So here it's Photomania, so hopefully it's fetching from Flickr right now into this photographer table, and it is. That's very good. So here we have photographers, right? That's what Photomania does. Shutterbug fetched the photos and showed you the photos titles. Photomania fetches the photos and then shows you the photographers. And we can look and see some photographers have 3 photos, some 9. So let's pick this guy, he has 9. Let's pick this guy, he has 3. And we can click on one of these. Again, hopefully nothing, this is Rio de Janeiro. Maybe let's pick somewhere else. How about that? No, that's no titles. How about this one? No, there's no titles. OK, we'll do Rio. Hopefully Rio is not going to do anything bad. Here we go. There's Rio. Oh, good. Not bad. OK, so there's our image view controller. So this all worked great. So hopefully it works here in portrait mode too. And it does seem to be working there too. OK. Oh, be careful there. OK, so there we go. So that's that. OK, you guys all got that. It worked perfectly. So now we can quickly move on to the next thing we're going to show, which is we're going to show how to put it in landscape mode to show here. So like right above where this duck's nose is, okay, I'm going to put a little button called URL. And when I click on it, it's going to do a popover. And in that popover, it's going to show me the URL that's showing here, the text of it, you know, http/something. Okay? So this is mostly to show you how to do popovers. So let's go back and see how we would do that. This turns out to be quite straightforward. So here we are. Here's our UI. And what we want to do is add a little button here that does URL. OK, so we're going to drag this bar button item into the bar here, and we're going to call it URL. OK, so this is going to be a bar button item that when we click on it, it's going to bring up a popover here, a little view or view controller that's going to appear, overlapping everything else. So how do we do that? And the answer for that is